Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bourbon Bites. My name is Clifton. Welcome to another Thursday night live stream. Thank you to everyone tuning in here live. I know a lot of folks came over from Trev's stream earlier. I always love the Bourbon Rich, who is an amazing whiskey tuber. If you guys aren't following him, I know most of you probably are, but sent some folks this way from his stream. So good to see some new folks, and of course the regulars here as well. I want to say hello to, of course, first Bourbon Rich, as he made his appearance before he headed out. Bourbon Hunter, good to see you. I saw you hanging out with Trev earlier today. James Taylor is one of our amazing patrons here. Speaking of patrons, we have our monthly movie night, almost a tasting, monthly movie night screening tomorrow night, where we're watching the original Roadhouse. Wow, I cannot speak today. Roadhouse. I've not seen the original. I'm holding off on watching the new one until I see the original. So if you guys want to watch that with me, check out patreon.com/bourbonbites to see all the details. It's tomorrow night, 7 p.m., basically the same time here, just over on our Discord community. So good to see you, James. Hopefully I can see you at the movie night. Devin is here as well. Good to see all the nerds. Came over from Trev as well. Good to see you again, Devin. Tater Dom Zofer, another amazing patron. Emily, one of our incredible mods here, back on the bus, back on the Cliffy bus, I assume. Tony's here. Who's the Bourbon Rich? Oh, Tony, you were there. So Tony, if you don't know, the Bourbon Rich is Trev Wilson, one of the original OG Whiskey Tube folks. Zofer's here as well, and Gandy Road. So good to see. Gandy Road is a Bite Club member, which is our YouTube membership here. Get access to some fun emojis and fun things. I need to do more with Bite Club. I used to have a whole shirt that I dedicated to it, so I got to do more Bite Club specific things. But thank you so much for tuning in. We have a very, very special guest today. This is a brand that I actually just recently learned of. I was at the New Orleans Bourbon Festival earlier this year. I say that is only like 3 weeks ago. So I got to try so many different incredible whiskeys there. A lot of brands I was familiar with, a lot of brands I was not familiar with. And one of them just really stood out to me as a clear favorite of mine for the festival. Now, I heard they picked up some awards too from the festival, so it wasn't just me having this opinion. But before I get too deep into the story, please welcome to the channel President and Chief Alchemist from Dark Arts Whiskey House, Macaulay. Oh, I don't have your background there. I don't have your last name. Oh no, shoot, that's my bad. Minton.
Yep,
I almost said Milton. I'm like, okay, no. Macaulay, welcome to the stream.
Yeah, thank you. I also go by the Bourbon Swami as well too. So if any of you guys are on Instagram, go ahead and follow the Bourbon Swami. I've put some interesting content on there. If you like psychedelics, whiskey, and meditation and things like that, that's what my life's about.
Yeah, you're awesome. I put your tag there. So if you guys look up his Instagram tag below his name there, give him a follow, of course. And mine as well if you want to follow me as well. But so Macaulay, thank you again so much for coming on the stream. I like I said, I'm new to the brand. I'm not very familiar with you guys' story, so I'd love for you to have a chance to talk about it here and taste through some of the incredible lineup you guys have.
Yeah, I mean, most people are pretty new to the brand. We hit the 1 year mark in 2 days. So somehow through some divine wisdom, our business was incorporated by the state of Kentucky on April 20th, just in time for the holiday season.
I was going to say, that's a pretty important day. That's awesome. Congratulations on the full year. That's awesome.
Yeah, I saw that incorporation and I was like, oh my God, God is real.
That is so cool.
Blessings flow from that.
Awesome. Well, I guess maybe first I'll just ask you a little about yourself. Like, tell us a little bit about, how you got into the industry, like what your background is, and just, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I've been in the bourbon industry almost 10 years now. I got started in college. I was at the Jim Beam Institute at the University of Kentucky. I was studying brewing, distillation, and winemaking. And I actually went on a field trip to a fermentation lab and distillery in Danville, Kentucky called Wilderness Trail.
Mm-hmm.
So I got an internship in the microbiology lab studying fermentation, of course, but I did a research project on some ale strain yeast, doing like flavor attenuation, alcohol attenuation, flocculation, just kind of driving the whole portfolio on it. And we ended up bringing that yeast strain to market. So if you're a commercial brewer or home brewer and looking for an English ale strain, that's a great one to choose out. After that, thought I was going to pack up and move to California or Colorado or Asheville. I didn't even care about the whiskey industry at that point. Honestly, I wanted to be a master brewer, and that was what my due course was. But lo and behold, if you know how to brew beer, you know how to do mashing for whiskey. So they ended up hiring me to be a distillery operator. So I cooked, swept the floors, ran still, just anything that they needed done, because we were just a really small, lean and mean team. I think I was the 9th or 10th employee at that time. And
Wow.
God, that place has grown into a major production facility and all over the country now. I was there for a while. Most of my career was centered around running the single barrel pick program, which I created from inception. I worked in sales, marketing, quality control of finished goods. I mean, I kind of had a finger in everything there at some point or another. And from that, just kind of always had this idea of what I would like to do and what impact I'd like to have in the bourbon industry and community. And I mean, I was sitting one day on the forklift in production, and I was like, man, I got to go back to school. I got to get an MBA, and I need to take my ass to the office because it is cold and dusty back here. And it's fun running a like MASH and things like that. But then you wake up one day and you're like, wow, I'm just another factory worker right now. So just kind of started working towards my education a little bit heavier on that. Went to Moonshine University. I took several other courses there and just kind of refined my thought process on what I thought the whiskey industry should be or could be, and also on flavor development. And always had it in the back of my mind of how I would do things a little bit different. And that's really where Dark Arts has come together. So I have been able to take off the bridle and just go full speed ahead on being a little bit my creativity and just developing some amazing whiskeys. We are we have about 50 different labels right now.
Oh, wow.
We'll dive into that a little bit more on with the show.
Yeah, well, let's go and get something in our glass. Let's get into it. So you said we're going to start here with this one, which is your, I think, is it a black label? It's hard to tell on the sample bottle, but this is the Barely Legal Bourbon, right?
Yeah, it's black to dark blue. Depends on what your perceptions are of.
Gotcha. By the way, I will say, you guys, your label is a standout. So this is the label that they guys have. I'll full screen myself real quick so you guys can see the full label. Let me see if I can do this without kicking you out. There we go. Yeah, so this is the label. Really cool. Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind, this, obviously an Alchemist, but can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind this design?
So I guess we need to talk about the name Dark Arts first. So Dark Arts is not a devil worshipping cult or witchcraft brand at all. Dark Arts is actually, that's what alchemy was called. This is during the time when scientific inquiry, mysticism, the arts, all that was kind of frowned upon by the church and the state. So alchemy was commonly referred to as the dark arts. One famous alchemist that we probably all know is Sir Isaac Newton. So, and there's several others that kind of help develop modern medicine and chemistry. But most importantly, alchemists are the ones who created the distillation process. Distillation was actually created in what is modern day Iraq right now. So that's kind of what we decided to do, was kind of preserve that history and honor that history instead of coming up with some huge marketing fable that you've probably heard at different facilities across the country. We don't want to talk about like my family's century-old farm. Maybe a great uncle like grew corn and decided to make whiskey there at some point and float it down to the river, and that's where Bourbon Street got its name. Or my mother decided to sleep with someone at the cooperage, and that's why I got whiskey in my blood. So we just kind of wanted to cut through the fables and just kind of honor that tradition and pay homage to the alchemical process. And that's what we view ourselves as. I mean, my official title, well, when you own a business, you can call yourself whatever you want. So I have dubbed myself the president and chief alchemist of Dark Arts Whiskey House. But on the label, we've got a lot of symbolism in there as well, too. So you can't really see it from that camera view earlier, but we have kind of come up with what we've called the 7 phases of whiskey alchemy. And there's 7 alchemical symbols on the front of the bottle that kind of highlight the whiskey making process. So the first one on there is crop growth, followed by distillation, maturation, finishing, blending, and bottling. So for so many times in American whiskey specifically, all you hear about is the master distiller. Well, they only control a small portion of that when you kind of break it down into those 7 phases. I mean, you go into anywhere else in the world, cognac houses in France, go to Ireland, Scotland, Master blender is the one that runs the show and actually makes the most money there. So we kind of have positioned myself as to help the team lead blending and finishing, and that's what our brand is all about.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yeah, I didn't even notice the icons. Yeah, they probably wouldn't show up on camera. So if you guys have a chance to look close at the thumbnail, you can see that, or just look up their bottles. But that's such. I mean, that's a great point, right? Like there's so much focus on master distillers, which is a very iconic role. But there's so many other players. Like I think a lot of people forget how many people it takes to make a really good whiskey, from the bottling to the label design. Like there's such a great team involved, and I think that's really cool. So, I mean, that's a great history lesson as well. Like, I think I didn't even realize that distilling had started in the Middle East. Do you know like about when that would have been?
Oh, I would be lying if I brought that data.
I would have believed you no matter what you said.
I once knew. It was a long, long time ago.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Well, I see quite a few people have joined as well. Just some quick shout outs to some folks. Mr. Jigs, Donnie the Linux Cat, one of our incredible mods. Curtis Darnwoody, good to see you again. Let's see who else is here. Whiskey Nose is here. What's up, Marty? Swan said he's a big fan of the line. Thank you. And tell Chad I love him. I assume Chad is someone you work with.
Yes, Chad is. Well, we kind of share the same bottling company that we work out of. So we are housed at a business called Divine Spirits, and they are the contract bottler for Rare Character and Dark Arts Whiskey House. So I work side by side with Mr. Chad and also Pablo Moy. So we all are just one big family out there. I mean, we kind of have similar brand constructs, but you also have to think of this industry as David and Goliath. So us small guys always stick together, celebrate each other's wins, pull together when something bad happens, or if we need something. It's just a supportive community, and technically we are competitors, but we don't see ourselves as that. We see ourselves as friends in the common cause of just making great whiskey.
Awesome. Well, let's get started with this one. So I haven't tried I've tried a couple of these so far, but I have not tried this one. Tell us a little bit about this Barely Legal Bourbon.
Yeah, so Barely Legal Bourbon, that is not a reference to 18-year-old porn at all. So that is actually a play on the mash bill. So the mash bill is 51% corn, 39% rye, and 10% malted rye. So it is technically the highest high rye bourbon that you can possibly make.
Right.
We always bottle that one at cask strength and non-chill filtered. And our core lineup, we'll go through that here in a minute, but those are all small batch. So what does small batch mean? It means absolutely nothing to anyone out in the industry except for myself, because I believe in a micro batching process. So all of our small batches are 3-barrel blends. So unlike, let's just say, I don't know, Maker's Mark, for example. If I'm drinking Maker's Mark and I buy a bottle in California and I buy a bottle in Florida and I buy a bottle 2 years from now, it better taste the same, right? So that is not the approach that I take at all. Every single batch is going to have a little bit difference of nuance, aromatics, and flavors to it. It's still going to be the same wheelhouse. So we're not just like throwing in different mash bills or anything like that, but we're just trying to highlight what can be done with those small scale productions on that. And I really find that more interesting than just having the same thing mondoon every time. So we definitely take a different approach to our blending process. I was at a conference maybe a month ago, and I was sitting with like Freddie No and like the head of Maker's Mark quality control at this like quality assurance table at a round table. And like, we're all talking and they're talking and they were saying a bunch of things about their blending process and how fine tuning everything. And I looked at them and I was like, man, I honestly do the exact opposite of everything that you're talking about right now. Because I think it's fun to keep it a little bit more alive. I mean, with this one, you're going to have proof differential on this one for one, because this one's always bottled at cask strength. And this one is something that also won silver in Best American Whiskey at the New Orleans Bourbon Festival. So was super proud to have that honor at that festival.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So this one right here, the one that I have is 6.5 years old. The proof is 115. And then for those not familiar, it's distilled in Indiana, but you guys do the bottling and blending in Kentucky, right?
Yes. So we buy distillate from 3 or 4 different distilleries right
Mhm.
now. So most of the production that we have right now is from Lawrenceburg, Indiana. It's not a secret where I buy my whiskey from,
Yeah.
except for the one that I have the NDA from, and MGP is not one of those. So
Right.
it's no secret. I mean,
Mhm.
I wasn't distilling this as soon as I graduated college, and I really wasn't distilling our 10-year-old whiskey in my fraternity house when I was at UK. So
Mm. For sure, for sure. Yeah, so this one is not one that I've had a chance to try before, but it's interesting. So this is the core lineup, right? You guys are pretty much high proof for everything, right? This is, I mean, the other ones are. Is there
yeah,
a reason you chose to be high proof focused versus lower, starting like a lower entry proof, or not entry proof? Sorry, a beginner pour, I guess.
no, absolutely not. This brand is more niche. We believe in higher age statements and higher proof. If you want to
Mhm,
add water to it or add an ice cube to it, you do it at home. I make my products to be drank straight out of the bottle. But
mhm.
as long as you're drinking dark arts, I mean, you can throw some Dr. Thunder in there, drink it out of a swirly straw. I mean, put some Ensure in there for a breakfast drink. I mean, just as long as you're throwing dark arts in there, that's all that matters.
Oh man, this is so good. I mean, like I said, I didn't have a chance to try this release at the festival, but something about you guys have captured such a rich like body to the whiskey that I feel like I don't get a lot. I mean, I listen, I have a lot of Indiana whiskey. This is something different. There's something special about it, and I think it's I don't is it when you're picking those barrels to do the small batch, is there a certain like flavor profile you're looking for that blend?
No, I just go to for the best available whiskey that I could make on hand. There's
Gotcha.
no
Okay.
there's no like spider graph chart of what I'm looking for or anything like that. I literally just I go in the room, I pull a bunch of barrel samples, I taste through them. I have an idea that sparks in my mind, and then I just try to fine tune and add layers to it.
Oh,
But
well,
for me, I one thing that I do not like is I do not like tannins.
okay.
If I have to have a glass of water to have a sip of whiskey, that is out the door for me.
Mm,
So I like big bold flavors, complexity. I like funky, and I also like sweet as well too. So
mm.
that kind of just leads you into all kinds of different directions, except for bitter tannic whiskey.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think what I love the most about it is this hits on all of my favorite notes. My favorite ones are a really strong oak characteristic, not tannic like you were saying, but more of just like you get that this is a very well aged whiskey. But there's also the darker, I guess like char kind of notes to it. Like to me, it's like it's combining that oak, little bit of smokiness, and like the base of that sweetness. I mean, this is everything I look for in a bourbon, which I think is why I was drawn so much to the brand. It's really, really well crafted. That's why I was asking. I was like, what did you do? How did you make this so good?
Yeah, and I
The dark
mean,
arts of it all, maybe.
I honestly believe it's in the process that we do. I believe strongly in the micro batching process and keeping things higher proof. I mean, there's a I think there's two other brands. I mean, one being an MGP brand that has this whiskey. It's not really a widely circulated mash bill like some of the other things that they have.
Mhm.
And our approach is just different to it. I mean, I was at a show one time and the MGP table was two down from me, and I was like over there talking to them, and like they kind of knew who I was, and I was like, "Well, y'all come down here, and I want y'all to try my 5149 versus y'all." And they're like, "How did you do this?"
That's how I feel. Like what?
I was like, "It's alchemy."
There you go. Well, and you said the mash bill, so you used a malted rye instead of the typical malted barley. Like, what kind of went into going like you said, like a 49% rye versus the typical, traditional 3 grain mash bill?
Well, someone custom ordered that mash bill and wasn't able to pay their bill for various
Oh,
reasons, so
okay.
I was able to buy
Okay,
it.
well done because that I've never had anything so
Because
I don't I mean I probably have, and my chat will probably correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems so for a bourbon, like you said, obviously barrel legal 51%. I don't know if I've ever had a 51% bourbon than 49% rye, even though there is the malted rye in there. That's something I don't think I've had, and that doesn't seem very common in the industry, right?
I personally have never had that mash bill in my life. When
Mhm,
I went on our buying trip to MGP, I, I always ask for like, do you have any one-off things? Do you have some
mhm.
like super funky barrels that no one else wants? Like, what is something like unique and that I can have and try? So when they presented this mash bill to us, we were just fell in love with it instantly and knew it was something that we had to have, and decided that We didn't need to do any finishing to it through our staving techniques, wine finishing or spirits finishing on that. It was just a beautiful spirit that just didn't need to be adulterated with water or anything. So just it came out to be amazing.
Gotcha. Well, as we go through each of these, I'm curious, like, what on average, like, price point for this? I know it varies depending on the market, but is there like a typical price range for this one?
That one suggested retail price from us is $89.99.
Okay,
So depending on where you're at in the
sure,
country and the world, you might see $10 more some places. I mean,
sure.
the liquor store down the street from my house sells it for $99.99. Another one sells it for $89.99. So once it leaves my loading dock, I have zero control over
Right.
what the price is on the shelf, unfortunately. And
No, makes sense.
it,
I just like to get a baseline just to kind of know.
yeah, it should be. That's usually the price on it. So,
Gotcha. And then Devin's asking, what's your oldest and youngest distillate do you work with? Which is your preferred base? So I'm not sure if they're asking about for this particular release or just in general. So maybe you can speak to a little to both.
so currently everything that we have in the warehouse is 7 to 10 years old. We do have some younger age stock coming in that I have a top secret research project that my lawyer will not let me talk about until I get some intellectual into place on that.
Nice.
So there will be a age stated product come out in the future, and it is amazing.
Mm,
And it will be the fourth addition to the core lineup.
gotcha. Okay. Well, I can't wait to hear more about it. Maybe I'll have you on again when that one comes out.
Oh yeah.
I saw another comment. So I've already finished the pour because to me it's so good. Tony made a comment. It says he only has one dark arts bottle. It's a 7-year rye finished in everyone's favorite Ambarana. He found that Ambarana finish works so much better with rye. Well, lucky for him, we also have one. Now this one's 6.5 years old. Mine's at 108 proof. But let's go ahead and move on to this one.
Yeah. So when I was starting to do all the Protocep research on this, I mean, my house looked insane. I had carboys of whiskey, like pickle jars on the counter, mason jars, like with all different pieces of wood on in them, like from different cooperages from across the country and Europe as well too. And just kind of really trying to fine tune what I wanted to do with some of our products. And I like Ambarana.
Mhm.
But for me, when I did my Protocep research, I did not like Ambarana in bourbon.
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
was not a fan of it at all, and wasn't a fan of it with the lower rye mash bills either. So that
Mhm.
one is actually a 95.5 mash bill from the gods in Indiana MGP.
Mhm.
Everyone knows that mash bill, but
Mhm.
I guarantee you, if I gave you a pour of that and told you to tell me where it came from and put my company on the line for it, no one would guess that correctly.
Yeah, that Amber on it, like I don't I'm sure I've had it with rye, but I've most recently had it with bourbon because a lot of bourbon brands are doing it now, and I know it's so particular. Like you only have it in there for a few weeks, I believe, like to even like make it drinkable. So with rye, can it like rest a little bit longer in those casks, or is it also super finicky and
So
you have to pull it?
there's I'll have to about like my maturation approach with Ambarana because there is I have a scientific background. I mean, working in microbiology lab and just being a student of the whiskey industry. I read white papers. So if you don't know what a white paper is out there, it's the scientific facts behind whiskey and not just
Mm.
opinions from someone on the internet that thinks they know it all. So when you're doing a maturation in a traditional Ambarana cask, for example, this is a multi-thousand-dollar barrel, and you're going to continue to use it and use it and use it. So you have to think about the extraction rates on it. So first few times you're in that Ambarana barrel, you're pulling out some of those nice vanilla notes, other notes as well too. I'm just going to fast track on that. Then you start pulling out third plus fill, you start getting into the lactone notes. So imagine
Mhm.
being at the beach and spraying on a little bit of that suntan oil, that
Mm.
real rich coconut note.
Mhm.
You continue to go through there and we keep degrading the wood. So finally you get into the aldehyde family in the wood and your extraction, and it can just turn the whiskey into a soap to wax like flavor profile on it.
Really?
So we made the decision to not use Amberana cask, but we use Amberana staves.
Okay.
So there's kind of twofold reason on it. So when you're using a staving technique, I'm putting those staves into the original 53-gallon American white oak barrel.
Mhm.
And when I'm going through and tasting those, when I determine it's ready to go, I can pop those staves out and put the bung back in, and it's just chilling. I
Mhm.
don't have to vat it into a steel drum, a steel container drum, IBC tote, anything like that, and it just holds its flavor profile. So when everyone likes to ask me, like, how long do you age it with the wood, and it is the answer is not a lie. It sounds generic, but it's all to taste. There isn't a spreadsheet out there in the world or a calendar reminder that says, hey, pull the staves out. It's been 90
Right.
days. Because you also have to consider the environmental factors during maturation as well, too. Am I putting this into the barrel in the heat of summer in my warehouse, or am I putting it in the cold and humid winter of Kentucky?
Mm,
So
definitely.
it just factors in on that, and that wood is one that I have to watch because if you can get too much into it.
Mhm.
Um, I haven't let that happen yet
Mhm.
because I've let some things go a little bit longer on the Protocep research, and it's just not what I was looking for.
Gotcha.
For me, the Amberana that we use is I worked with a cooperage to develop a custom toast profile, first of all. So for me, I think our rye Amberana has a little bit nicer of a vanilla profile on the front
Mhm.
end of it. I
Yeah.
think you get a little bit of fruit note in there as well too, and you also get some of that spice from the rye whiskey as well too. A lot of these barrels taste like a apple turnover to me,
Mm.
or cinnamon toast crunch
Mhm.
vibes
Yeah.
almost. Uh, of course, every single barrel is going to be unique because the original distillate went into that barrel for 6 to 7 years. It's kind of formed its own like fingerprint or DNA, if you will, and then we've just kind of morphed it a little bit with the Amberana staves on there. Second fold on the staving technique is you have to think of the sustainability. If we're working with French oak, Mezzanara, or like a Amberana, like do we really need to chop down a 200-year-old tree, create a 53-gallon plus barrel, ship it from those locations, and use it when we could still make the same extraction rates out of the staves? Because the whole
Mhm.
purpose of the stave is you have to think about the available biomass in it and the extractables. So once you use those staves, you can pop them out, and I don't use them again. I take them home, and I have probably the most expensive barbecue in the world because I
Oh.
use Amberana and the most expensive French oak money can buy to cook food over an open fire in my backyard.
Oh my gosh.
And
Where's the invite?
it's been soaked in bourbon too. So
Oh my gosh, that sounds incredible. I mean, and like you said, this one is definitely the Ambrana works so differently with the rye. Like you said, it has that sweeter note, and you mentioned kind of like the kind of suntan lotion kind of thing. I do get coconut, like almost like a coconut, not like the milk, but like more like the coconut meat inside, that kind of like earthy kind of flavor. I mean, this is really interesting. It complete, like you said, you made the comment earlier, like, could you guess where this was distilled? I would have absolutely no idea. You're right. It's so different. Mm.
well, it's not like you're taking a swig of Panama Jack suntan oil, though.
No, that's what, but that put the idea in my mind. There is like you said, tropical. My first thought was almost like a pina colada, or not a pina colada, but like a. I was focusing on the pineapple. I was thinking it was pineapple, but then the more and more I thought about it, I was like, that's coconut to me. I'm getting coconut for my opinion on it.
Yeah,
So.
I had a single barrel that I wrote. So like when I'm going through, I don't need to after I pull it, I don't need to like taste the same barrel 20 times with people.
Mhm.
So I usually write a couple little buzzwords on top of a barrel just so I can remember. Because for example, when someone comes in, they want to do a barrel pick, they taste something, I listen to them, and then we pivot instead of going into like some other of these corporate barrel programs that you go to. It's like, all right, here's your 3 samples, buy it or get the fuck out.
Right.
We're going to work with you and find something you love. So
Mhm.
if you hate coconut, we're going to pivot away from the haystack one, for example. So the
Mhm.
haystack was, I don't know if you ever had one of those. It's toasted coconut with chocolate on top of it. It's just one of those like candies that they make out there in the world.
Okay.
So that was one. I mean, I've got spiced cherry turnover. I mean, there's just all kinds of varying profiles that come with it, and I mean, they're not all the same. So that's the beauty of a single barrel as well too, and being able to merge some of those flavors and layer them together, like as we have developed our our library of flavor and aromatics, because that's what I truly view my whiskey collection and barrel collection as, is a kind of library of flavors and aromatics. And that's how we're able to layer, come up with custom blending and truly unique products.
Definitely. And I think you mentioned like the whole cinnamon toast crunch note. I think for every bourbon that I've had as Amberana, like that's the dominant note. This one, it is fruitier. It's more interesting, I think. I like I said, I don't know if I've had a rye that's had those casks before, so it works really, really well. So another great one. Now, price point for this one, is it about the same or is it a bit more?
The core lineup is line priced at $89.99 suggested retail price. The only difference on this one is I chose not to bottle this one at cask strength.
Okay, so this is 108, right?
This one's always bottled at 108 proof.
Gotcha. Was there a reason? Like, did it just seem to work the best to that proof?
Well, 108 is actually a holy number. Do you know what mala beads are?
I don't.
You know those beads that hippies wear and like do prayers with?
Okay.
Maybe. So anyway,
my mom would know. My mom was a huge hippie, like in the 60s and 70s, so she was super into all that. So she'll probably watch this stream and be like, "Duh, how did you not know? I never taught you that."
Yeah, there's 108 beads on there, and it's one of the holy Hindi numbers as well too. But that's only just a side tangent on it. One time during COVID, I was doing a blending project for a client, and there is nothing going on. I'm over here on Wall Street bets on the stonks all day, doing nothing at work.
Yeah.
And I had a client, he was wanting to do a blend. So I was like, all right. He's like, I don't know what proof I want it at. And I was like, okay, so what I'll do is I will proof it down from 120 down to 80, every single proof point. And over the course of a week, I brought in probably half dozen to a dozen people into the office and like had them try it through. And almost every single person just honed in on that proof point of 108. We all of us in that group kind of like higher proof, but we don't like things that are just like gonna pickle your lips almost. You know, like I've had some barrel picks out there in the world, and like, God, I take a sip of it and I'm just like, my lips are on fire right now. Like I can't enjoy this. So for me, that kind of safe point is hundreds. I mean, bottle and bond's a little low for me now just because I've been drinking cask strength for so long. But, 105 to 120, depending on the distillery, is kind of my sweet point.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's actually, for me too, people ask, like, what's your favorite proof? I think usually I always say 107 is like the sweet spot for me because I love anything from 100 to 115. So I kind of like balance in the middle. Like, to me, that's like, I mean, I love cask strength whiskey, don't get me wrong, but if I had to pick a favorite proof point, that's my jam. So this is right on point for me there. Cool. Well, I guess, and you guys, if you have questions in the chat, please feel free to let us know. He seems to obviously have some great information. So if you guys have ever,
and then one more shameless plug. That one actually won silver for best small batch in North America at New Orleans Bourbon Festival.
Awesome. Again, I don't hesitate to see why, because it was my standout.
We also did a cask strength single barrel that the festival selected, and that actually won gold for best American rye whiskey.
Oh wow! Is that the one that we're gonna try at the end here?
No.
Okay.
That we'll just pretend you didn't say that, and we'll
ignore that. Okay, cool. Well, let's go ahead and move to the other one you sent over. This is the red label. This is the 7-year-old straight bourbon whiskey finished with toasted. What is that word? Man, my eyes are not good.
Jupis Floor.
Yeah, you pronounce that way better than I would.
Well,
it's for joke saves. For those of you like me that has no idea what that means.
Yeah, so I grew up in Western Kentucky, a small town called Hickman, actually. So my language is a little bit different than a lot of people. So when I started buying that wood, I was calling it jalipes. And
That's probably something close to what I would have said. I'm from South
And
Carolina. We make up our own pronunciation.
I was corrected by several French people over the last year. But the funny thing is every one of them pronounced it different as well too.
Oh,
So,
okay. There you go.
but let me talk about that wood for a second. So, French oak. I love French oak. My only beef with French oak sometime is what we were talking about earlier is sometimes it can be very tannic and drying on the palate. So when I was doing my Protocep research, I had, oh God, I don't even know how many different types of French oak and different types of profiles of toast level on it. But when I got to this one, I remember unscrewing that mason jar lid and smelling it. And I was like, oh my God, I found it. Tried it, was beautiful. So Jupice is actually the forest name in France. It is the smallest French oak producer in the country and the world, since you can only get French oak in France. So I called the cooperage up, and the guy was like, "Oh man, you've got really, really good taste." And I was just like, "Fuck!" I was like, I know exactly what this means. I was like, this shit's going to be expensive.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And he was like, yeah. He's like, that's the most expensive French oak money can buy, right? And I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
no, I did not. I was
Yeah.
like, how about you just write up the ticket and send it to me, and let's not talk about it and rub it in my face right now before I change my mind. But the reason I decided to go with that oak or that French oak profile is I think for me, taste is perception for everyone, of course, but it has a beautiful savory French oak note to it. I get red fruit in the palate, like raspberry, and then on the back end, there's a perceived sweetness that I get like a toffee or kind of a cream soda vibe. But then you also get some of that spice profile because it's a very heavily toasted piece of oak as well too.
Okay.
And it merges with that mash bill. So this is actually a high rye bourbon as well too, but different mash bills. So this is 60 corn, 36 rye, and 4% malted barley. And each of our labels have different colors that correspond with the mash bill. So that black to blue one is the 5149. The gods have determined that rye whiskey's green, so that's the rye color. And then red is always the 6036 mash bill.
Okay.
So you might see other barrel or bottles out there in the market with that same color label, but on the front of it, it will say Oloroso Sherry or Armagnac or maple syrup or something like that. So we keep the bottle consistent on there, but we just change out that tagline on there. We do have some other color mash labels too, but we'll segue into that in a little bit.
Yeah, this one to me, it's a lot more. I mean, I know I like French oak, but I'm not as experienced with it, so I can't necessarily say that like I can pick out some of those more nuanced notes. I will say though, the spice is the thing that stands out to me. I think I don't think it's just coming from the mash bill and the whiskey itself. I think it's the spice from those casks. It kind of has like, I don't want to say like menthol kind of feeling, but like on the back of the throat, it's like cinnamon that kind of just lingers and just hangs out in the back of the palate. And I think I see that a lot on French oak. Yeah, I mean, that's really good. That's and you said this is also part of the core lineup as well. Oh, we lost audio. I lost your audio. I think you adjusted something with your headphone and your headset, and I lost you.
How about now?
There you go. Sorry, I don't know. I didn't realize you were talking, so I may have talked over you. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was saying that cinnamon probably came from that Amburana because once you go Amburana, you can't go back. Kind of mindset on it. But also taste is perception, so everyone's got a little different vibe to it.
Yeah. Well, what kind of notes do you get like with the bourbon, the red label bourbon? Like what does it showcase to you?
That mash bill unadulterated, or the mash bill with the French oak in it.
Maybe both. Like what does the French oak bring to it that it didn't have originally?
I think it brings a little bit more. I mean, you obviously get a heavy oak note on the front end of it. I mean, I believe that it brings out a little fruit note, like raspberry in it, and then you get a little bit of perceived sweetness as well too from the caramelization of that wood sugar. And then I think some of that spice is accentuated from the rye mash bill, as well as that heavy char or heavy toasted piece of wood as well too.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, these are all so different, but that's what's great about it. It's like a
That,
whole different. It's a whole exploratory experience, really trying each of them.
and that was the reason. I mean, that was the purpose of us putting together this core lineup like this. Because the funny thing is like when I'm doing market work or doing festivals or events, every single person that comes up and tries it has a different favorite one for a
Really?
different reason. And I mean, just look at Buffalo Trace, for example, and think about their lineup. Like, all right, we got Ancient Age, we got Inkle Rare, and then we got Stag. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just different proofs and different water amounts in them and different ages. And
Mhm.
I mean, those are good products, but that's also kind of boring as well,
Two mash
too.
bills, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, since we just tried this one, I think we should move on to the single barrel that I have. This is one of the bottles I picked up at the New Orleans Bourbon Festival. I only bought 2 bottles from the festival, like of all the ones I tried. This was a must buy for me after trying it. This is the 7-year Dark Arts Whiskey House. This is a finished in white port wine casks. So this one's coming in at 56.4% ABV, which is 112.8 cask strength. And yeah, this was picked for the festival. So can you tell us a little bit about this one?
So yes, so that one, so you can see that has that same red label. So that is the same foundation whiskey as the 6036 4 mash bill on that one. And that is actually segues us into kind of the barrel pick program and custom blending program that we do. So that one is actually finished in white port. So white port for me is a little bit more brightness, fresh fruit, a little bit floral. I mean, there's a couple different categories of port. You have red wine or a red port, which is a little bit more dry cherry, dry red fruit, if you will. And then you get into Madeira, which is like figs and dates and figs and dates.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's bright, refreshing, has a little perceived sweetness on it as well too. White port has been one of our top sellers as well too. It's the demand has soared on that, and white port is actually one of the least produced of the port family.
Really?
Most port is Madeira or red port.
Gotcha.
So if
Yeah.
you're out there and listening, please start drinking more white port, Oloroso sherry and Fino sherry and all the weird French dessert wines and European white wines are like that, and that family as well too, so I can buy more barrels.
Yeah, well, I will say I'd never even heard of white port until I know High West released a limited edition that used the white port barrels. It was for one of their Midwinter's Night drams. I think it was the final release they were working. I didn't have a chance to try it, but they used white port for that, and everyone raved about like, why is this so good? Why have we never tried this before? So this is my first time trying it, and I get the hype now. I'm like, okay, I see something like you said. It has a crispness. I kind of want to say that's different than what a normal port finish. Normally, port, like you said, is dark. Bit fig. I usually get fig on port, but this is like, I mean, I don't know if I want to say pear. That might be a little too much, but there is a brighter fruit note in this.
It's more fresh, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's again, we're talking same mash bill here as the one we just tried. Completely different whiskey. That finish really does change so much of it, and I really enjoy it. Like I said, if I had to pick a favorite from the festival, that was my favorite thing I tried. Like full disclosure, it's really incredible.
That one actually won gold for best cask strength whiskey, and it beat out Elijah Craig's single barrel.
Wow. Well, I had no say in that. I was not on the voting panel, but I can definitely see why. It just really, I mean, like I said, I think I was telling you before we started the stream. The first day I had a chance to try. I don't know if it was this one. I think I tried a couple of the ones you guys brought to the festival. And I was like, what is this brand? Like, I've never heard of this. Why are they so good? So I made a point to seek out during the festival and keep trying your stuff and trying the rest of the lineup because I'm just blown away just by like, especially you guys being such a new brand, but you have the experience. Like you said, you've been doing it for over 10 years.
So the brand is really an insider and industry brand, honestly, at this point, and we're having to segue it into the general public and general consumer, if that makes any sense at all. I mean, everything that we do is in the more niche category because that kind of segues us into our finishing and single barrel program because I use red port, white port, and Madeira, Pinot Noir, Cabernet. Sauterne, Tokai, Spanish orange wine, Fino sherry, Oloroso sherry, Armagnac, Calvados,
Mm.
maple syrup. Use getting into the rum game as well too, and then we're starting to get into our Mezzanara as well too.
Wow. That's a lot of options. How did you come into such incredible selection, I guess, of those?
Oh, it just pays to put your time in the industry, and I mean, some like one couple of my really good friends just happen to own a cooperage or barrel brokers.
Mhm. Yeah, not to get into industry secrets. That's just really incredible to see that, because I know a lot of that range is what you see in some of the huge brands. So to see that you guys have access to some of that too is just
Yeah,
really cool.
and those people that help supply us, they all know that I want unique one-off things.
Mhm.
So when I get calls all every week, it's like, "Hey, I've got these Riesling brandy barrels. Are you interested in those?" I'm like, "All right, I got to try the brandy first, and then
Mhm.
I'll determine if I am."
Do you do what a lot of people do is maybe like as you're trying to guess what the flavor profile would be, do you put like a little bit of the brandy into the whiskey and see like how it matches up?
So what I usually do is I pour a glass of it and I drink the glass of whatever it is and I coat the glass in it and then I'll put
Mhm.
a little bit of whiskey in it.
Gotcha.
It's not 100%,
Sure.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it kind of gives you an idea of where you're going with it because I mean you have to think like when we started this business last year, we didn't even know what this whiskey was going to taste like when I was doing all this. So
Mhm.
it was just a honestly a huge gamble and just jumping into the deep end because I had a really good job. I worked at Wilderness Trail. I worked for Campari. I mean, I set for life there. I mean, there was
Mhm.
some higher aspirations and climbing the ladder, and I decided to walk away from it.
Yeah. That's a big move, but I mean, hopefully it's going to pay off because I'm in love. Like I can't wait for this to hit California. Well, you teased us on some other expressions that you guys either have or you're working on. Any info you can give us of what's coming next?
Well, I mean, another thing that we do. So we had an article written by Market Watch that was picked up by Whiskey Advocate, and it was calling us like basically one of the disruptors of the industry because we're single barrel sales are kind of going flat. So what we've developed is a custom blending program,
Mhm.
and what we'll do is I'll take a barrel group or store owner in and I'll let them try through these various elements and kind of listen to them and we'll sit down and I'll be like, all right, you make a blend, I'll make a blend, and you make a blend. And we kind of just talk and work through it. So we've released red and white port rye whiskey. We've done Armagnac and a different type of French oak. There's been a Madeira, different type of French oak. Our recent release of our Derby bottle here is a varietal of two different types of toasted French oak. So when you come into Dark Arts and do a barrel pick, I mean, there is basically unlimited options
Mhm.
on flavor combinations that you could possibly curate on that. And we that's what excites me the most is just kind of driving the envelope on flavor development because I think that by putting the hands of making a whiskey into back into the consumer, you're empowering people to actually make a whiskey that they want to bring into the public. And also it gives them a value proposition to say, hey, I went and sat down with Macaulay and I made this with him versus I went there, I got 3 samples and I picked this,
Right.
or I got several samples here and got to choose from the Passover ones from the other two bigger liquor stores up the
Yeah.
food pole, you know.
Yeah. So when someone's doing a barrel pick there, are all of these different mash bills you guys have available to them, or is it just the red label usually?
No, so I do I do a mixture of it. So there's some rye whiskeys that are finished, some 5149, and then we also have some 10-year-old that gets the purple label as well
Oh,
too. So
wow.
any custom mash bills always have the blue label on them, and
Okay.
then 10-year-old gets the purple label. So
Wow.
something that we've been doing fun with the 10-year-old, just I mean, I've got Armagnac and Oloroso Sherry and 10-year-old, but we started this double barrel program. So it
Mhm.
doesn't mean double oaked, not to be confused,
Okay.
but it's just a 2 barrel blend of 10-year-old. And we've seen some great whiskey. be made that way. And I mean, there's been a couple of groups come in and buy those, sell out instantly, and it's just been fun because having more options and having creative freedom is what I'm all about.
Mm. Is the 10-year-old also from Indiana?
It is. It's the same mash bill, 6036, but with 10-year-old, I wanted to class it up, and purple's my favorite color, so had to make it a little bit differentiated.
Oh man, a good choice. I was picking the colors for the background. I'm like, purple seems appropriate for this brand, so there we go. I was thinking like alchemy, like it's just like it's kind of like mystical, and like it's such a cool thing that I feel like we don't talk a lot about, and like just the whole history of it all, which you probably know way more than I do about it. It's so cool. Well, awesome. We have a little bit more time. If anyone has any last minute questions, please feel free to ask. Where all are you available as of now? Like, is there certain states, or can people buy online?
So we're in 22 states right now, and we are available for purchase online. You can hit up our website to get the core lineup or get the Derby bottle. We're also going to start trickling out some of our limited releases as well too. So one thing that I'm super proud of is we made the first whiskey in history, which is something you can't even say really in the modern age.
Okay.
So we made the first whiskey in history to be paired with cannabis consumption. So our first special release was called the Blunt Blend, because a lot of people do cigar batches and cigar blends. I don't smoke cigars. I smoke weed and I smoke blunts. So I wanted to make a whiskey that I would really enjoy smoking weed with. And that was a 7-year-old rye whiskey that was aged in Madeira cask and Armagnac cask.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. That's a combination. Yeah.
And
listen, I'm not a weed smoker. I mean, I'm in California, so I could be. But listen, when that comes out, you're welcome back to the stream. Let's fly you out. Let's get out here and let's do it. Let's get high and try it.
Let's exchange care packages.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. Well, that's awesome. That's such a cool thing, and I think I like that you're doing things different. Like you're not approaching the standard way that people do things. You're trying new things, and that's so cool.
We've also got several other LTO or specialty releases this year. LTO means limited time offering. It's a marketing jargon term that no one knows unless you're a monster from corporate America or have a marketing degree.
I mean, I work in marketing, so I also am familiar with it.
But so I think I'm still developing the next one right now. I think that we're going to come out with Red Port and Pinot Noir finish. I've got some really interesting double oaked rye whiskey that we're going to come out. Oloroso is also an idea for this year. And we also do a rift on the Ambarana. So I had a bunch of maple syrup barrels last year, and there was this one, I hated it. It had like a dirt taste in the mid palate, and I was just like, what am I going to do with this? And I decided to throw some Ambarana in it. I let it sit for a month or two, just kind of didn't think about it. And I went over and I was like, I'm going to try this and see what's up with it. And then I poured a glass of it, and I was like, oh my God, what did I create? So long story short, we didn't sell any maple that year. It was all maple rye. So that one's going to come out around the holidays as well too. And I've also dabbled my toes into the single malt game as well too. I went on a trip to Wyoming. I went to a friend's house, Nate, Whiskey with a View. And he was offering me, everyone always like, yo, you want some of this BTAC? You want some Pappy or something like that? I'm like, nah, I don't want that. I'm like, what do you got that's interesting that I've never had?
Right.
So he pulled out all this American single malt, and like, I was just like, oh my God, like the gears were turning, the lights are going off in my mind. So decided to get into that market as well too. So we've got some beautiful Kentucky single malt right now. It is it's all like orchard fruit and tea notes, like those sour peach ring things.
Yep.
Most of them taste something like that, and I was just like,
wow.
I went on this buying trip to a distillery that I wasn't a fan of their whiskey, and I even told my friends when we went there, I was like, expect us not to buy anything. Walk in, they had 5 barrels on the ground, and I'm tasting through them, and I was like, oh my God, I'm buying all these. And I was like, you got anything else in the back I can try?
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that just proves there was no bias. Like the bias, like didn't matter. It's like you knew what was good, and you found some good barrels.
Exactly.
Yeah. one last question from our friend Emily. She says, "What's a finish that you haven't tried yet that you want to try?" So I guess with finishing, is there something that you haven't gotten your hands on, but you'd be really curious to try?
Yeah, there's some more obscure French like dessert wines that aren't really drank and consumed in the United States that I'm very interested in getting into, and also some liqueurs as well too from Italy. It's just kind of hard to find and source those barrels because once they get their hands on those, they don't really want to let go of them, kind of
Oh,
deal.
interesting.
And I'm also looking for the next thing too. I mean, there's Japanese plum wine as well too. Those are extremely hard barrels to find because it is generally plum wine aged in Mizunara cask.
Oh,
So
okay. I've had
um,
one. There's a California brand out here that does a Japanese plum wine single malt. I'm not a fan of it, but that's just my personal opinion. Like to me, it's too funky. But I've only tried one expression of that, so I'm open to more ideas. But that one that I've had, I'm like, I've reviewed it on the channel. I'm like, not for me.
yeah, they must have put some funky distillate in there.
It was very weird. It just yeah, it wasn't my favorite.
Well, I mean, single malt is kind of the Wild West, though. Like,
Right. Agreed. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
I'm not sure if they. I think they were distilling their own single malt because they have a few other expressions, but yeah, that one just didn't do it for me. But listen, I've only tried one, so that maybe there's better. If you only try one Ambarana cask, you may just say that you don't like it, but open your mind, try a few different ones. Maybe there's a rye. If you've only tried bourbon, try a rye with it. I think it could change your mind.
yeah, that reminds me of that song, "Free Your Head." You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know the song, but
Oh,
I'm sure they
okay.
do. I'm sure they do in the chat.
Jefferson Airplane, White
Gotcha. Okay.
Rabbit.
Cool. Well, Macaulay, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast. It sounds like you have some awesome stuff in the works. So if you ever want to collaborate again, like I said, you said you're going to be out in the California area at some point in the
Yeah,
near
I'm
future?
segueing from San Francisco to San Diego.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'm in Los Angeles area. If you want to, hey, I want to try, I want to try that weed one you're working on, honestly.
Yes.
But awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. And you guys make sure to follow him on Instagram. His tag is down there. Do you want to plug anything else? I think we gave a couple shout outs, but is there anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, dabble in the dark arts responsibly.
We don't always do things responsibly here, but I like that. I like that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everyone watching. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will be back here next Thursday with a few bottles I'm behind on from a few of my friends over at Penelope. So I'll be reviewing those next week. But stay tuned. Make sure to hit subscribe, especially if you like dark arts. I would hope to have them on again soon. And y'all have a great rest of your night. And again, thank you so much, Macaulay. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all.
All right. Cheers, all.